everybody. Let me get the slides quickly. There we go. If you would have told me 1 year ago that only a couple short months into my software engineering career, I'd be sending a message to my manager that read like that, I would have told you you're crazy. If you'd have told me he'd respond like that, I would have walked out of the room. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Hey everybody, I'm Joey. I am a first rotation co-op on the product engineering core team, and this is my Itential journey so far. To tell you a little about myself, I am a junior computer science major at Tech with concentrations in AI and information networks, go Jackets. I have a beloved family dog named Remy, and in my spare time, I develop a website to help people with a rare mental condition called dissociative identity disorder track the effects of their affliction. My story at Itential starts, like many others, with lots of training. Now here is a set of technologies that I had never used prior to beginning my interview process with Itential. Over here is a selected set of technologies that Itential uses for our business practices. And I know we've got some engineers in the audience. And what you'll notice, if we do a quantitative analysis of these data, is that I had a lot of work to do. So I spent my first couple weeks here familiarizing myself with many of these technologies, after which Glenn gave me a series of Pokemon-related training exercises to help familiarize myself with the Itential automation platform. After that initial training was done, I had a rotation-defining meeting with Glenn, during which he identified to me a problem that has plagued our software engineers for many years now. To give some context, as a software-as-a-service company, perhaps our single most critical business operation is the process of releasing our software to our customers. So with that significance in mind, let's take a look at the problem that Glenn identified to me in this meeting. The state of our software engineering, the state of our release process as of 3 months ago. Each month, the randomly chosen engineer in charge of making the release would start by consulting this 900-word document to learn about the release process at a high level. After they had notified the other engineers on Slack that we were ready to begin the process, they would consult this separate 200-word document about how to assign testing tasks to each of our development teams. Once that testing was complete, they had a 600-worder and a 1,400-worder to read through before actually running the programs, filling out the forms, and kicking off the processes needed to make our release. And even worse than that, these instructions contained out-of-date information. They required engineers to rewrite parts of multiple existing programs for the current release, and just in general, they described a process that was extremely manual, arduous, and error-prone. And despite all of the complexity that I've just conveyed to you, I can assure you, I am simplifying here. I believe it is fair to say, Glenn was right. This was a problem. And so I began work on creating the solution, a tool that would automate our release process. Now, my first and most critical step in designing this new release automation tool was, of course, to decide on a cool name for it. Since release automation tool spells out R-A-T, Glenn suggested that I name the tool after a famous beloved rat, and I could think of no rat more famous or beloved than Remy from the movie Ratatouille, who happens to share a name with my less famous but equally beloved family dog. So, with the name Remy decided on, second order of business, how should I create the tool? I had a wide array of programming languages and technologies to choose from, but the longer I considered the question, the clearer my choice became. We happen to own an in-house piece of software that is custom built to automate the exact type of tasks that Remy needs to complete. So my choice was clear. I would be automating the release of the Itential automation platform using the Itential automation platform. Just a side note, wouldn't that look awesome on a billboard? Marketing team, I've gone ahead and made a quick mock-up for y'all here. Do what you will with it. If you do use a design, I accept Cash App, Venmo, Zelle, I'm real flexible. Anyway, with the name and the tool decided on, it was time for me to get to work. I took the time needed to learn those 3,000 words of instructions like the back of my hand and used them to construct this simple and concise flowchart that you saw earlier. There was much to be done. I took the next month or so to read documentation for the various services that we use to make our releases, familiarize myself with our automation platform, and refer repeatedly to this flowchart in order to produce Remy version 1. Now, I know this looks simple, but I assure you, it is much more complicated than it looks. And on March 2nd, it was ready to go to work for the team. On that day, it made an announcement to our engineers on Slack that we were ready to begin pre-release testing for the new version of our product. It then monitored the status of that testing for a few days, and once we got the green light from our engineering teams, it awaited mine and Glenn's final go-ahead. One quick confirmation later, and Remy autonomously ran the programs, kicked off the processes, and filled out the forms needed to make our March 2026 customer release. And 20 minutes later, on March 5th at 4:31 p.m., Remy had an announcement to make. This was more than just an announcement that the release had been completed successfully. This was an announcement that what had for far too long been an arduous manual process that ate away an entire day of a developer's time each and every month had been transformed into an automated process that required only a couple short minutes to configure. Now, as much as I would love to stand up here and tell you that REMI version 1 was perfect, I'm a firm believer in the iterative nature of the engineering design process, and must admit that this initial run helped Glenn and I identify some flaws in the tool. For example, it was less configurable than we would have liked, and it had certain technical limitations that made it difficult to recover from a possible failure. So I spent the next few weeks addressing those limitations, and this was the result, REMI version 2. Now, I know it looks complicated, but I assure you, it is much more complicated than it looks. And on April 2nd, it successfully made last month's product release with no issues, saving yet more precious development time. So, with the end of my rotation in sight, my final orders of business for REMI were to deploy the tool to a place where any of our engineers could be given access to it, and to write up maintenance and usage guides for the tool. And indeed, starting this month, our product releases will be made using a version of REMI that any of our engineers can be given easy access to at a moment's notice. It gladdens me to know that as I return to school for the summer, this company will continue to take advantage of and iterate upon this new streamlined process that I've created. Speaking of my return to school, what skills have I acquired here that I'll be taking back with me as I resume my academic development? Well, when I wasn't working on REMI, I was working on making the product that REMI releases more performant, robust, and secure, and as a result, I gained experience that you can't get in school, doing software engineering as a team process on a real industry-scale production code base. I also got experience with many critical software services and technologies, including but not merely limited to the ones that you see there. And working on REMI gave me a chance to practice the ever-important software engineering skill of recursively abstracting a monstrously complicated problem down into its component subproblems in order to produce a solution. From a non-technical standpoint, I got lots of practice communicating with my colleagues, both in responding to feedback to my code changes and in clarifying requirements of my manager. I got my first corporate exposure, which taught me how professionals in this field dress, speak, and interact with one another in meetings. And I even got the opportunity to do some cross-team collaboration to help with our recent successful Fern Docs launch. Big thanks to Leela and Devin for inviting me to make those contributions and for these very kind words. So, when's the next chapter in my story with Itential? Well, I'm pleased to announce that I will be returning in fall of this year and summer of next year, respectively, for my second and third rotations. And if I enjoy those rotations as much as I enjoyed this one, I will be returning full-time after my graduation in December of next year. This rotation has taught me that I enjoy pursuing my passion for software development while surrounded by the brightest minds in the industry much, much more than I enjoy solving differential equations in an exam hall. So I can assure you I very much look forward to returning. Thank you for your attention, and thank you all very much for the opportunity. See you Thank you. Any questions? Yes, please.
On your list of skills of things that you learned at Itential, one of the things that was missing on there was the Itential platform, because you're great. I use the Itential platform. I'm not sure an easy way to answer this, but what's the learning curve like to using the Itential platform to solve your problem?
That's a good question. I would say somewhat steep. There are a lot of nuances with, for example, passing data between different components of a workflow and having dependencies where I want something to happen in a workflow over here to affect what happens over here. So I would say it took me maybe 2 weeks to a month to really get a good handle on any task that I wanted to complete in a workflow. I would say I know how to confidently complete that without having to look at our documentation or having to ask somebody how to do it. So I'd say relatively steep, maybe 2 weeks to a month, but not terrible. Everything becomes self-explanatory once you have a good understanding of it.
Gotcha. And is there any particular feature request on the top of your head that you wish was implemented?
Not off the top of my head, but I'd be happy to meet with you later to discuss some things about REMI that I thought could be done easier with certain features. Any other questions?